Hi. And thank you for all your interest. I'm not sure I've ever had so many questions on a single subject as what I'm going to do on a 6-week sabbatical. So I shall tell you when I get back, but the plans are, as Andy said, it'd be a wonderful opportunity to pray, to read, to write. We've got a couple of weeks in Jerusalem as well, which will be part study trip and part holiday. We're very, very excited. Last time Philip and I had a month off was, as Andy said, 25 years ago. Every time I've been due a sabbatical since, I have sort of hung the sabbatical and I've started a church instead. So not planning to personally start any more churches, and consequently I get a sabbatical this time instead. So thank you for your interest. Do pray for us. We'd be really grateful for that. And pray, amongst other things, that we'll come back full of energy and really knowing clear direction for the next season come September. Philippa and I, when we first married, I guess we just anticipated one day we would start a family. And we heard talk, as you do, well, babies can be tricky and family can be demanding. But we, being rather overconfident types, thought, we didn't say anything, but we thought to ourselves, no, we will be able to take this one in our stride. Whilst others may have to cut back and reduce what they do or make changes in other ways, not the two of us. We will breeze through the whole thing. We will not only have 1 child, 2 children, maybe even 3, but we will also continue all the ministry and work that we're doing and just watch it all grow around us with nothing more than just a little extra energy. So that was the unspoken agreement between us, and I can only say how wrong we were. I guess it started with the pregnancy. Experts, and any of you who have children know all about this, but experts say that you can break the pregnancy into 3 periods, 3 trimesters as they're called, and that whilst the first and the third can be demanding for the woman, normally you have a period in the middle, the 2nd trimester, which is just a wonderful time. Well, for Philippa, somehow the 1st trimester and the 3rd trimester bled effortlessly into one another. And we never found such a thing as that easy sort of blooming period in the middle. And then to our joy, and I do need to make it clear here that we love our children very, very much indeed. But to our great joy, Edward was born and an earthquake broke out in our lives. Not only did he wake before 6 o'clock every day until he was 7 years old, shortly to be followed, actually, only 21 months later, by 2 more, by twins as well. But he was high energy and never seemed to want to do anything unless either Philippa or I were with him. And consequently, rather than this sort of effortless walking on water thing which we thought that we would do, we crashed to the ground and realized that massive reappraisal was needed. And we needed to first reappraise our own roles. We realized that with this additional blessing, with growth in our lives, that we actually had to do less of other things. We had to redefine our roles. And then we realized too, because the church we were involved with and the ministries we were involved with did continue to grow, that we desperately needed lots of other people to come on board as well if we were going to stay alive and keep things going. What we didn't realize at the time was that this is a natural process any time anybody grows. And growth is a normal desire for us all. Individuals here want to grow personally. Most couples, at least at some point in time, decide it would be nice to have a family. Churches seem to have this inbred desire to help others find faith, to grow in maturity and to start other churches as well. But what we didn't appreciate was that any of those changes, personal, family, or church-wide, go through a similar process. And the process is this: the pain of growth leads to the need of personal change. Personal change requires others to get involved, and then more people getting involved then goes on to lead to further growth. And these are lessons not only that we've learnt personally, but that we find in the scripture that Macy read to us earlier. And I want to unpack those as we conclude our 3-week series on serving this morning. So let's look at those 3 lessons. And the first of them possibly is the most surprising, which is that growth is painful. We, of course, all pray for growth. We long for growth, and therefore get shocked or even wonder if something is wrong when it starts to hurt. Certainly for the early church here, they have gone through the most extraordinary trajectory of growth. In chapter 1 of Acts, you read of 120 people. By the end of chapter 2, you have 3,120. 2 chapters on, chapter 4, now we're told that the number of men alone numbers 5,000. Well, if you add their families into that, then conservatively speaking, you have now got 10,000 men and women and children involved in the church. In the next chapter, chapter 5, we're told more and more men and women joined them. And at the beginning of this chapter that Macy read to us, we're told that the number of disciples is increasing. So conservatively speaking, one imagines we're talking of a church north of 10,000, maybe 10 to 15,000 men, women, and children. And the story here focuses on a particular group within that huge, burgeoning, accelerating community of faith. And that is the widows. Now, widows in first century ancient Near Eastern society are some of the most vulnerable individuals in that society. Simply because it's the men at that time that worked. It was the men who earned the money. There is no welfare state. There is no safety net. So essentially, when you read widow, you read person with no income. And so we're looking here at the most vulnerable of individuals. And that is why, because they had no way of drawing income, that the church said, at least for those that are part of us, we will take care of you and we will daily feed you. It's just a natural overflow. Everything God had done in their life, they wanted to pass on to the needy in their community, just of course as we should be doing the same. However, there is an added complication in this story. And that is that there are 2 groups of widows. You've got your Hebraic widows, your Jewish-speaking widows. They've probably been in Jerusalem, the surrounding area, all of their lives. They feel at home. They know, if you like, the way to get around. And then you have the Hellenistic Jews. These are not Jewish-speaking, they are Greek-speaking. They have come from somewhere else in the empire. At some point their family left Judea and now they have returned. And they do not speak Jewish. In other words, they're like the outsiders. Or to put it another way, we've got a racial issue going down here. We've got a group of women who do not speak the natural language, who would identify maybe as much or more with other parts of the empire, and what is happening is that the apostles are still trying to lead this whole expanding ship. And consequently, the Greek-speaking widows are not getting fed. They're going hungry. Well, I wonder whether you can imagine what it would feel like if the goal of the community, the stated goal, was, don't worry, widows, just put yourself in the shoes of a widow just for a moment. Don't worry, widows, we will feed you all. And then only one group, one language group, if you like, the home team get fed, but the rest of you get missed out. I mean, you can imagine some of the tension that is going on. This is not the equivalent of being missed off a circular email. Something which for many of us would be profoundly grateful if we were missed off a few more of them. No, this is about something as basic as staying fed. And of course, hungry people are not good judgment people. And so they would not only have been hungry, they would have felt rejected, they would have felt alone, and they would have probably, some of them at least, have been thinking, it has got to have something to do with who I am and the language that I speak. For some at least, they would have thought, this is not the first time since I've been back in Jerusalem that I have been overlooked because of others. And so as a result of all that, there would have also been relational strain, hunger, rejection, and the relationship's just a bit awkward, to say the least. So this is not a happy scene. But also, whilst, if you like, whilst we're trying to locate the pain, whilst much of it, the major part of it, is with the widows, that is not the only place that there's pain. I want to suggest too there would be pain amongst the apostles. I think they'd have felt pretty bad too. After all, they're wanting to care for people. Have you ever said to a group of people, we're going to do this, and then singularly failed to carry it off, albeit with good intentions? Well, if you have, you will know, I think, how the apostles feel. I think they would have been mortified that that the Hellenistic widows were not being fed. I suspect too that they would have felt the tension of the fact that whilst they were trying to get everything right, this organizational thing just wasn't part of their gift or their sweet spot, if you like. Now, the truth is, as Christians, we're all to serve. And there are times where simply it needs every hand to the pump. But the truth is also that if any of us serve for too long outside the particular way that God has wired you up, or me up, and we're all wired up differently, if we serve for too long outside that, then we start to feel the toll. And for sometimes we feel the toll physically or emotionally or spiritually. I have a friend who was right at the heart of a fast expanding movement. I mean, really, not too dissimilar to the sort of pace of growth in Jerusalem. He was at the heart of a movement whose biggest gathering was 3 million people together. This guy's at the heart of the whole thing, organizing it because he loves serving, but it's not really his thing. And after several years of trying to keep that ship afloat, he ended up in hospital for 6 weeks with his physical health very damaged indeed. So I'm suggesting, I think there's pain all over this story. And if you think this isn't a great place to start, it's about to get worse. I have friends who lead one of the largest churches outside London. It's grown over the last 20 years. I know that if I press them and say, tell us the inside story, the story of you and your team over the last 20 years of amazing salvations, community service, the presence of God, give us it in a word, sum up for us in a word what this has been like. You know what their answer is? Their answer is pain. They say, that sort of extraordinary growth over 20 years has just hurt. It's been difficult to handle. Now, because they are such good leaders, the church as a whole is largely unaware of it. And it's one of the reasons that I'm not telling you which church it is. But for the individual leaders, they know what they've had to carry. Now, many times, when a church grows or changes and there is difficulty or there is pain, it is not managed so well, and it spills out into the church as a whole. And this, of course, is always a tragedy. And I know in a crowd this size that some of you will be able to think of situations, personal experience. Here's the church that I was in. It grew fast and then it just started to hurt. It may even be that a few of you feel like, yeah, I can identify with that closer to home. And of course, whenever that happens, it is a tragedy because you sort of think the church is the one place which shouldn't be increasing pain. Don't you think? I mean, we should be the solution to pain, not the increasing of pain. But this is what has happened here. People are being missed out, and so consequently there's physical hunger, there's feelings of rejection, there's racial tensions, I suspect there's broken relationships, probably also people questioning their faith. For when pain happens in a church, people somehow find it hard to filter the difference between fallen, broken, often well-meaning people and the God who's behind them. And therefore, sometimes questions of faith get complicated as well, and there's also burnout. All of that is in this passage. Now, why have I drawn our attention to this at the start of this message? Why have I decided to start this message at such a low point? And there's several reasons. Firstly, because for those of us that have been through this experience, I want you to understand what's happened. Because whenever we need to go through a process of healing, we have to first acknowledge our pain and then understand what has caused it. And those are two important steps. But the second thing is that often God allows pain in order for it to be a catalyst for further growth. He often allows pain. He allows pain sometimes corporately. He allows pain in individual lives, in your life and my life, in order to create a movement towards growth. And so that's the second thing that we see. That growth not just often creates pain or frustration, but growth then demands change. I've told the story on many occasions, I'm not going to repeat it all now, of how Philip and I came to move to this city. But one of the important elements was that we received a text message from a lady who was praying for us. And in that text message, she said, "You're like a plant that's outgrown your pot." You're like a plant that's outgrown your pot. I instinctively knew what she was talking about. I knew that at some level inside, that I had outgrown the current challenges that I was facing, and it was time for a move. And that frustration became the catalyst and something of the faith to be able to start all over again here. Growth led to pain, frustration in my account, and that forced change. Now here's the big mistake that individuals and churches make when they are feeling this sort of tension. What they typically try and do is they simply work harder. They work harder rather than ask, what is the change that God is wanting to bring about? And if you're experiencing that sort of frustration or pain in your own life, in any particular part of it, then my encouragement is don't simply try harder, fight more to keep everything together, but rather ask, God, where do you want me to go? Because the apostles here do two things which actually result in further growth in due course. Here's the two things that they do. First of all, they let go of their current responsibilities. They let go of them. In other words, they say, we can't do this anymore. It's exactly what Philip and I found when we had one child and then 3 children. We looked at each other, then we looked at everyone around and said, we can't do all this anymore. And you go through periods in life where you accumulate lots of responsibilities, and then as you grow, you have to shed some of them in order that you can become more focused. Apostles say we cannot care for these widows anymore. Now, my experience is that letting go of things is a challenge. Here's a few of the things that I struggle with at the times in my life, and they seem to come around fairly often when I have to let go of things. The first is believing secretly. Please understand, I would never say this to anybody, that I can do a better job than anybody else. And I don't want to risk a drop in quality by handing this to somebody other than Mr. Capable here. And that, of course, is something that causes many of us to hold on to things longer than we should. Other times, it's simply because I am getting more value from my role than I would like to admit to you that I'm getting. In other words, it's making me feel good. Some level, the appreciation, the applause, the acknowledgement is stroking my ego in such a way that I don't want to let hold of what I've got. Other times it's simply, I love the job and I'm getting a lot of satisfaction from it. And I cannot see beyond it to what might come next. Or maybe it's simply, I don't want to let go, admitting that I can't do it all. For to let go would be an admission of failure. and to acknowledge failure might be too crippling an emotion to handle. I wonder what it is for you. I wonder what it is for you that causes you to hesitate or hold on to things that it's no longer yours to hold on to. The apostles were smart. They said, we can't do this anymore. They must have even said, we can't do this, and hey, we know we're not doing a very good job. So they handed it over, and they did one other thing. They worked out what they were really meant to be doing. Here's how they describe it in verse 2. It says, it would not be right for us to neglect the ministry of the word of God. And later in verse 4 they say, and prayer. So it would not be right for us to neglect the ministry of the word of God in order to wait on tables. They're not saying waiting on tables and caring for widows doesn't matter. They're just saying we can't do both of them. So they went through that sometimes difficult process of identifying things that only they should be doing right now. Now, this is a process we all have to go through from time to time. We all become overwhelmed with our responsibilities. We all have to let go of things and work out what is it that I can do best in this situation. So if you're experiencing pain right now, I would suggest it may well be time for change. And if so, you should clarify what you should let go of and what you should hold on to. So growth led to pain, then growth led to change, and then thirdly, growth demanded new people getting on board. Now, given that the apostles have just said, we can't do this, there is now a big gap. So those that have been around for a while get more clearly defined, so it needs other people to get involved. And we're told in verse 5 who they are. We have not heard any of these names before. Stephen, Philip, Prochorus, Nicanor, Timon, Parmenas, and Nicholas from Antioch. In other words, it looks as if these are new people on the scene. And this is exactly as it should be. Those who've been around for a while start to clarify their roles. Others come in to take the slack. And that is important in every area of life, but it's important for us as a church right now as well. That as we're constantly wanting to do things better, as we start new teams, as we think, who should the team need to be? Well, that guy's been around 18 months, or 6 months, or for some of you, 3 months. And you think, well, let's ask him. And so, or her. And when that person does that, then there's a gap over there. Well, how do you fill that? Will you fill that with the new people on the block who've just arrived? Now, thank you. There's a couple of important things here to bear in mind. The first is that it seems evident in this passage that there was no, here's the important role and here's the unimportant role. You know, the preaching and prayer is what the really spiritual people do. And anyone who's, to be honest, not very good at preaching or praying gets to care for the widows. No sense of that at all. In fact, exactly the same Greek word is used for both levels of involvement. It's simply the word service. What Luke is communicating through this is it doesn't matter what you do as long as you are using your gifts and your abilities to serve others and to serve God. He's saying there's no pecking order here. And of course, Paul develops this when he talks about we're a body. I mean, those of you that know me well know you don't want me organizing things. I don't play the drums, which is why Sam won't let me in the band on the drums. In other words, we're to do the things which we're gifted to do without thinking, oh, I'd really like to do that thing over there. And just occasionally you meet people and they're struggling to come to terms with the things that God has gifted them with. And maybe it's because, who knows, for some reason, other things have become more valuable. You know, in their family or in a previous church or whatever, this was the thing that was applauded, prioritized. Listen, I hope here that we can develop a mature outlook which says it all matters. The key thing is serving him, not how we do it. If you love children and you're good with children, then don't go on the tech team. Sorry, Ben. But if you love tech things and you know that children are not your forte, then do the tech team. You get my point? Or whatever. But we're here to serve. That has been, of course, the whole message of this series has been we are called to serve. Serve in the whole of life. I use my gifts, my abilities, my talents for God and for others. But then also we serve in the church. And if we don't, pain ensues. And all these other things, which of course we don't want anything of. So they saw that whatever you were doing was service. Now that all said, there are occasions where God just asks us, just essentially says, serve. You think, I'm not gifted at this. And it's like he didn't hear you, he just says, serve. Remember one leader saying that people often came to him and said, I feel like I should serve your ministry. And he said, well, here's the brush. Maybe you can take care of cleaning the auditorium for the next 6 months. So it's horrible when it's in your bag as well, isn't it? Where were we? I really can't remember. Yeah, so the job is clean the auditorium. And he said some of the people were like, no, you don't understand. You know, I'm meant to come with you, preach with you, and that sort of thing. And his comment was often, he said, listen, if you can't clean a room, then don't expect that one day you'll be able to clean up people's lives. So there are times where we're just asked to serve. And can I just say too, you never graduate from that. I realize that for many of us in the work environments that we work in, one does graduate from that. One becomes too important to do certain things. That should never be the case in the church. Because we imitate him who thought it was worth serving by giving his very life. And you will find if you follow him and are obedient to his whispers and nudges, that there are times, even when you're carrying significant responsibility, where he'll take you aside and he'll say, just serve. And it's an important reminder. And it would be nice if we could say, oh, don't worry, I've learnt that lesson. But I suspect the human heart is such that we need reminding from time to time. And of course, the best way to remind it is by actually living it out. 2, here we should notice there are certain qualities that are required. It says that each of these 7 were wise. Wisdom, right through the Old Testament, is a very practical quality. It's not a sort of philosophical pontification. He sounds very wise. Don't understand a word he says. He must be very wise. Wisdom is managing your finances well. Wisdom is being self-disciplined, because that works. Wisdom in this instance would have been, I understand about processes and systems and making sure that we have things set up in such a way that it's not the Jewish-speaking widows only who get food, but the Greek-speaking widows, they get food too. Wisdom here would have been, don't worry, I can do multiple different ethnic groups. I know that just something, I know I can cross cultural barriers, ethnic barriers. That would have been wisdom in this instance. In other words, as we're thinking about where we serve, one of the questions is, what do you know how to do? What do you know how to do? If you know how to do light, sound, visuals, Ben would like to talk to you immediately we finished. But if you know how to make people feel welcome, then you talk to Jen. And we'll give some practical ways of doing this before we're done. But you get my point. What do you know? You might say, I don't know anything. Well, that's okay. We'll train you. For those that have just got willing hearts and say, listen, I don't know how to do any of this stuff, but I'd like to do that, then no problem. We'll get you on board. and we'll train you. And so these were men and women, or these were men in this instance who had wisdom. But secondly, they were full of the Spirit. Now, have you noticed that you'll do any job better if you're full of God's Spirit? It's not just about singing and lifting your hands on a Sunday. And actually, the two guys, Behaziel and Oholiab, who created the tabernacle in the Old Testament, they were craftsmen, but we're told they were full of the Spirit. You find that judges and government administrators and warriors all needed to be full of the Spirit in the Old Testament. In just the same way, they were looking for men and women who were full of the Spirit. Now, you might say, oh, well, that counts me out then. Can't serve here, not full of the Spirit. No, I would suggest let's turn this one round. Why don't you serve and get full of the Spirit as you go? You say, well, how do I do that? Well, you ask. You just ask. You tell God you're thirsty. You say, well, then what will happen? Well, he'll give you his Spirit. You say, what, straight away? Maybe. Maybe you'll have to wait a little while. One friend, Kenny, who saw others around him have life-changing experiences of the Spirit that sort of just set them alight. And he wanted the same. And he said to God, he said, I'm thirsty, I want more of your Spirit. And he came for prayer, and it seemed like nothing happened for Kenny. And Kenny said, for the next 3 months, he said, every night as I fell asleep, I told God, I'm thirsty. I'm thirsty. Will you satiate this longing in my heart? After 3 months, he was stopped by a neighbour in the stairwell of his apartment block. And this guy said, look, he said, I really hope you don't mind me asking. And I hope this doesn't come across as rude. But I see you from time to time. Your whole demeanour's changed. What's happened to you? And Kenny realised, sometime in that daily habit of telling God he was thirsty, God had answered his prayer. So sometimes you get it straight away. And sometimes you wait. But he'll never make you wait longer than you can bear. And he'll always give his Spirit to those that ask. I can't think of a happier place to be than in a church of serving people full of the Spirit. I mean, what fun is that? So I want to encourage you to do that. And there'll be a team here at the end. And if you know for you, maybe for you it's, I just know I need to orientate my life around service, you can come to the front. Maybe it's, I just want to be full of the Spirit. Then you can come and just ask with someone else. Sometimes that helps too. And so those two qualities, wisdom and fullness of the Spirit. So how do we apply some of this? Well, today's passage builds on the message of the series. We're called to serve. And we're asking everyone in the church, everyone who considers Christchurch London to be my church, we're asking everyone to serve. We think that's what Jesus would have done. We're asking now, for some of you, I'm aware you're serving in the scattered church, Monday through Saturday, in our social action projects, in our life groups and our connect groups. And we're thrilled that you're doing that. But others of us are serving in our gathered church on a Sunday. But there's probably some of us, and probably some have been around a long time, and others who have just arrived, who aren't in either camp at the moment. Our encouragement to you is that if at all possible, that you serve too. And as you leave this morning, there'll be people on the doors with details of where you can serve, if you would like to, and you're welcome to take one. But my encouragement is, if you take one, do something about it today. Do you know why? Because in 2 weeks' time, you will not be so inclined. So grab the moment, grab the momentum, and do it now. Maybe the band could come back, please. What's interesting is, as a result of this process, pain, clarification of roles, stepping out of roles, and then adding new people in, that we're told that the word of God spread. We're told the number of disciples increased rapidly again. They're going to have to do this all over again soon. And a large number of priests became obedient. In other words, here's the process. Growth, leads to pain, leads to change, leads to new serving opportunities, leads to further growth. And that's what we're anticipating. It is July now, but September is coming. And in September, many of the seats which are empty at this minute in time will be filled with new people arriving in London. And we want to have teams in place that can both provide an inspiring Sunday that equips people for Monday through Saturday, and then a scattered church ready to receive others and make them part of the communities that we already enjoy. And so we, like the church in Acts, goes from redefinition, clarification, new people on board, to further growth as a result. So my encouragement is, Christchurch, let's get ready for the autumn. Enjoy the summer. Enjoy the relaxing. Enjoy the picnics between the services starting next Sunday, weather permitting, as Andy Tutt reminds us. But let's enjoy hanging out. Let's enjoy doing those things, but let's get ourselves in position. Because I guarantee you there'll be a whole load of new people here this autumn. Let's stand together.